Among all the inhabitants of the dragon realm, many catch the attention of its residents. Living in an ecosystem dominated by predators large and small captures much of the imagination of the peoples who inhabit the many biomes of the garden. Dragons are undisputed the sovereigns of the heavens, but many who live in such lands have probably spent their entire lives without ever actually seeing a dragon. Which is not the case with the famous monarchs amongst heaven and earth, the lesser dragons. Wyverns. Wyvern is an umbrella term used by many to describe and catalogue the many pterosaurs that inhabit the garden, just as big cat or monkey is used to refer to many species or even completely unrelated groups. The term wyvern is used to describe azarchids, ornithocerids, tapajarids and so on. But the term is mainly used on the occidental garden to denominate in specific group, present through all of said lands, both feared and adored by the populations that coexist with it, while we associate them with small, weak and perhaps even silly critters. Anarognathids are the ones who manage to ascend to the throne. The evolution of this particular type of wyvern and its success story begins with the demise of many others. In the end of the period analogous to the Cretaceous, the extinction took place as well as that of our timeline, being due to the impact of a meteor. Although much smaller, such a meteor was still capable of having catastrophic repercussions around the globe. Several of the large species of the garden in the period, mainly from groups such as Tyrannosaurus, ceratopsians and sauropods, turned out to be the most affected. Along with them, large pterosaurs and even the first birds were also highly harmed, causing the opening of many niches. After a long period of fires caused by rising temperatures, volcanic activity and landslides caused by long torrential rains and irregularities in the oceans, the world finally rested in a long winter. Different regions have been affected in different ways, but the one who interests us is the eastern continent and islands that would become Iramundo, Umisho and other such nations. In this landscape various animals would still have their chance to shine once the giants were gone. Creatures like Aleoramids and Ceratosaurids would go to become the largest predators of the region. But in this context another breakout star would also emerge, hidden in their forming islands, away from the conflict between theropods and the rising mammals, waiting for their chance to enter the game. The ancestor of the so-called royal wyverns was a small animal about the size of a bat. Its diet based on insects, adaptive insulation to retain heat. Another thing also helped the small creatures to go forward, it being their advanced parental care and a surprising skill, crop milk. When the world got warmer, the regions out of the islands would see the emergence of two strains of royal wyvern. The first being characterized by a stocky build and legs more closer to what we would associate with lizards than what is commonly seen in pterosaurs, hunting like a small and weird cat, and the other growing taller, closer to what we would expect of something like a azarchid. Despite having a longer body to accommodate their main hunting weapons, two massive claws analogous of talons. Despite efficient, this strategy would prove to be a really dangerous niche the moment raptorial-esque birds started to evolve. By the end of this era, both ends of this new wyverns would become increasingly rare. The influx of said birds and more agile mammals that adopted the cat body plan started to impact the smaller forms of the royal wyvern kind. The ones remaining would be those with size and power enough to diversify and look for other feeding opportunities, or those who got for themselves a paradise to retire and avoid the newcomers as much as possible. Despite never regaining the niches they once ruled over, this retirement of the monarchs prompted the rise of the diverse and unique forms the current royal wyverns that inhabit the modern lands have, being unlike any other contemporary pterosaur, and for one of the members in this family, it can even be called a relic of such forgotten time. The Umisho archipelago is known for many things that should be talked about in other opportunities. But for now we will focus on one of the most well-known things about the archipelago, its unique fauna. Many of the animals in here are found exclusively on said islands, one of this being a royal wyvern, and yet the most primitive amongst them, but, unlike many would assume going by their far cousins, this critters lack the posture and imposing nature of an undisputed king like the others of its kind. In size at least, the Shio is a small omnivorous pterosaur, hunting a variety of small prey ranging from insects to small mammals, and occasional fruits and seafood. In many ways this little adorable gremlins are similar to the first of the royal wyverns, mostly likely for the fact that Yumisho was already an isolated ecosystem when the small wyvern arrived. Despite this, the ancestors of the small king managed to fare well against the next stages of biodiversity invasion, including the arrival of the first humans to colonize the archipelagos. In the vision of the Yumishan folk, Shio are highly regarded with respect and admiration not only for their cutesy appearance, but also for their voracious hunger and near unmatched skills in eliminating pests, being surpassed only by the cats and prowling spiders that predate on them. Despite all that lack of size, you shouldn't let that fluffy exterior and seemingly docile nature towards larger animals fool you. These creatures also own a reputation for their boldness. While defending their nests they are known to swarm any creature, with even large theropod dinosaurs being victims of such mortally annoying beast. Like other wyverns they are indeed social animals, living in enormous colonies that take the form of burrows made on the side of mountains or river banks where the nests are located. These colonies are made by both related and unrelated animals. These groups, though, don't cooperate much aside from patrolling the regions around their nests, with each individual couple being responsible for itself and their young. Couples will often adopt a strategy where during one night, one of them will guard forage while the other guards the nest, taking turns each night. These creatures will have in the smallest of clutches at least 10 hatchlings, bringing yet to the table another of the many differences between wyverns and other pterosaur groups. Opening this small tangent, while most Gardenian pterosaurs are known for having a large number of hatchlings that they don't attend for and are born fully developed, royal wyverns have small young that are dependent on their parents. The reasons for such weird trait is unknown, but one of the main theories has to do with the island origins and eventual arrival of the group to the more continental territories, making it advantageous for couples to raise their young together and give them more time to develop and get bigger before leaving the nests. Eventually this behavior would be passed down to the other royal wyverns. While in the Shio this prompted altruism by the sharing of food and resources, in other wyverns this was one of the many pieces on their highly interspecific competitions, one of the most brutal examples being neighbors to the Yumishan primitive wyverns, right in the Iramundian mountains. In the silence of the region known as Clouded Mountains, rumbles can be heard at distance. A massive boar, known locally as Tokuntra, the Barbary hog. This invasive species was brought by an Western empire, the Viscal, during an past attempt at colonizing Iramundo. Even after the conflict that ended with one of the few defeats of the Viscal, the Barbary hog stayed as one of the many grim reminders of their presence, still ravaging and causing damage to the ecosystem of the Clouded Mountains. But like the Iramundian people resisted, so does the forest, including the monarch that inhabits the fog. Karamakal, the monarch of fog, one of the Saint Patrons of assassins. This mighty wyverns are mostly terrestrial, being masters in navigating the mountainous terrain, their front limbs possessing round palms covered in keratin to assist in walking and climbing the rocky walls as they patrol the mountains, almost like a weird dragon goat breed. They are also known to be capable of flight, but are not particularly good at it, using their wings mostly to glide between long distances. Their 3 fingers stay in a position where they don't really touch the ground, each sporting hook-like claws. Those fingers are not as mobile as the ones of other animals, being mostly capable of performing the action of open and close. These fingers are not that efficient on climbing, but as a particularly heavy animal, with the largest known males reaching the 300 kilograms mark, Karamakal isn't a tree climber anyways. Those claws are mainly employed in prey handling. They will usually prey on small dinosaurs, lizards and especially mammals, with particularly experienced individuals being observed trying to take down young proboscideans, with variable degrees of success. The front limbs and jaw of a Karamakal are extremely strong and muscular, granting him a lock rivalized only by the chocking ceratosaurids. They aim for any soft tissues within the body, employing their weird fingers as hooks, having powerful articulation to close like a lever, going deep making the Karamakal anchored in place while a single or multiple bites are applied. Most Gardenian consider the Karamakal to be the least social of the royal wyverns, mainly due to their reclusive nature and typically being seen patrolling alone. when in reality those lesser dragons are as much social as their other kin, but approaching a more isolated way of life to said sociality. Males are the most solitary, sometimes forming coalitions of related individuals but typically wandering on their own. Those are the ones usually being spotted due to their larger sizes and the habit to go up and down the mountains more than the females, who usually stick to more isolated regions. When two males encounter, they will engage into intimidating displays, rarely escalating into fights. Those fights are performed by ramming into each other with the intent of flipping the opponent upside down to expose their belly and thus show dominance. Both males avoid using their lethal bites and claws on each other, but if after a successful flip neither side backs down, things can get messy and result on life-changing injuries, sometimes even causing the death of the animal. These fights between males, though, are not territorial fights. Males have no real territory due to their migratory nature, walking over the entirety of the mountainous barrage, instead being most likely a way to just drive away other males from their temporary homes. The real territorial wars happen within the female social living. The fog queens are unforgiving and tyrannical in their reign. Females will form loose social bonds, where the large dominant will often harass young and smaller females out of the best nesting spots and food sources on the higher grounds, forcing them to nest into the forest floor, or even worse. Particularly low-ranking individuals will suffer harassment from the other low rankings, at risk of ending up losing space not only in the group, but in the mountain entirely, kicked out to the steppes that surround the clouded forests. In this hostile habitat, this Karamakal suffer with extremely unforgiving conditions and competition by other top-order carnivores. Most of those individuals often sneak their way back to the mountains, invading others' territories to steal resources before being inevitably chased away again. Some of those exiled will form their own coalitions, but those can be even as problematic since it attracts to attention of local top-order carnivores, being a high-risk, high-reward situation. Even with all these challenges, some populations have been observed surviving the steppes, the most successful one often being observed stealing dens from large burrowing mammals in the steppe such as sloths in order to avoid the theropods, hunting horses and small prey. Males also can be banned to the steppes, but survivors are more rare due to their size, not allowing them to use the dens in effective ways. Without cover, they are easy targets, but surprisingly, smaller, female-like males have been observed. What prompted the speculation of a possible subspecies of this wyverns inhabiting this unforgiving environment, but no confirmation about said has been made yet. Speaking on unforgiving environments, our next monarch lives in an equally dangerous submerged world. True tide masters, fighting the war even in their first days of life. For this one, we will going to take a look at the Iberian and Creatone coastlines. The peaceful sounds of the windbreak in the ocean. In this calm environment, what at first appears to be an immobile rock may surprise you. The entire coastal region of Iberia all up to the Creato is dominated by mangroves. This region is an inland sea known as Lucinus, the fortune crosser, due to its enormous importance to the market, similar to the Black Sea of Earth, being one of the main and easiest connections between the east and west of the Garden. This route is home to several species of fish and mammals, and also home to large predators like sharks, squids and meteor hincoids, but in the shores of the eastern portion, the dominant animal is a curious pterosaur with the power to rumble even the largest shark of Lucinus. Not this little creature, however. This mokoboko, crab lemurs, is subject to another episode. Our tidemaster waits below the waves. Gorberries, largest pterosaur to ever evolve, with exceptional males reaching up to 10 tons. This massive animals were able to grow large by taking the ground-dwelling nature of royal wyverns to a whole new level, abandoning completely their ability to fly in favor of a more compact skeletal structures. This allows them to walk on the bottom of the ocean rather than swim similar to a hippopotamus. Being arguably the most social wyverns after the Shio, this coastal behemoths will form herds composed by a couple females and a large dominant bull responsible for chasing away potential dangers. Despite this closer form of living, this are also the species who shows the least parental care amongst the monarchs, instead adopting a strategy closer to other pterosaurs. Mothers will travel into the mangrove of the giant salt hags, opening passages with their large sizes and deposit the eggs in the most covers possible. She will stick around until they hatch and will provide crop milk to them, rarely feeding during the process. And when the young are able to hunt by themselves, she will leave back to the herd. Young Gorbris have more flexible fingers than the adults, enabling them to climb trees to an extent. Those fingers will get progressively less mobile as they turn into something similar to hooves. The young will stay next to each others until they reach a size comparable to a pig, in which point they will start to separate and start to frequent bodies of water more frequently, starting in the brackish waters and slowing moving their way into the coastal ocean. With a variable diet of invertebrates, slow-moving fish, plant and fruit material, they develop fast, especially female individuals who make their way into forming herds a lot earlier. Sisters will maintain together in most cases, while males typically separate and become loners in the first years of their adolescence. Despite their tolerance to smaller animals, both sexes of Gorberries are remarkably aggressive. Females forage on the shores, while males go into pelagic areas. On the shores, females tend to harass various animals for spaces on the beaches, with the biggest competition to them being the saltwater hippopotamus, who compete resources, and the occasional catrato who comes to shallow waters in search of easy picks, but overall not facing too many dangers, while males have to worry about predators in their league and in some cases even above their own, having to maintain their guard while foraging. They also have a brutal competitive relationship between themselves. Males engage in similar contests to the caracal, but do not hesitate to use their crushing bites to apply mortal wounds on one another. Rare is the male who doesn't have a face deformed and covered in scars. Defeated males can also end up banned from them coastal lines, unable to hunt effectively or defend itself from oceanic predators. This males can risk their luck as a loner on the beach, or force themselves to go deeper into the mainland in search of feeding spots. This often results in malnourished individuals, or worse, man-eaters. While man-eating does happen in other wyverns such as the caracal itself, much of them avoid such interactions. Unlike Gorberries, man-eating individuals are well known to not only chase boats, but also for invading small villages next to rivers and wetlands. This, allied to the natural aggressiveness and territoriality, creates a beast capable of causing massive damage to the people who live and depend on water. Many are the lives that have been taken by the ogres who come from the depths. While Gorbris is a great symbol of dominance by power, they only come out as tyrants in the eyes of many who inhabit the region. Deeper in Abaria though, or next and final monarch inhabits, and with a blue and orange crown, it is the one who carries the title of King of the Wyverns. A blue crown stands above the yellow grassland. A king patrols its territory. Unlike the others, it's accompanied by both of his sons. The Karudrakam is strange even amongst their own kind. Those are the last descendants of the raptorial wyverns. Males are massive and muscular animals, and even being capable of flying despite all this mighty size, being the largest animal capable of flight to naturally evolve. Most like an eland male, every trace on a male Karudrakan is made for fight and display. Going all the way from the bright-colored horns, the strong red loose skin and around the neck, and the thick hair like integument that covers their body and forms a mane. These adaptations allow the ground-nesting wyvern to not only show its dominance to rivals, but also to fend off against theropods, including the equally massive riser. The parenting on Karudrakan is as unique as the own creature is amongst its relatives. Despite being capable of taking off, male Karudrakan are extremely poor flyers, using it mainly on their hunting strategies that will be discussed in a second. Females, on the other hand, are not only smaller, but more capable of covering larger distances on flight, making it so they are the most common dispersers that go out of the nest in search of new regions and spreading their genetic codes. Said females often gather together on specific regions for socialization, but are most commonly seen flying alone from spot to spot. Males, on the other hand, rarely leave the region where they were born. Sons will often stick around the territory of their father, creating their own territories next to each other at a distance. They are pretty much capable of still communicate. With their superior vision and hearing, they can be far apart enough, creating something of a social web between this related males, almost like a large kingdom surrounded by its colonies. This proves to have its benefits and downsides. The main one being the probability those males are never going to achieve the massive bulk of their parent. The main advantage of this strategy is the inherit of their parent territory when he dies, and the increased probability their young will have a better chance of survival, since females don't stick around for very long after laying the clutch. The related males will help each other raising their chicks and fending off against invasions, especially against their barbaric rivals. The already mentioned riser can easily take down a loner Karoo-draken, even if it's the father, but against a 4 or more of them, the tides can turn really quickly. But what would be a king and prince without a royal guard? Meet the creel, clearly not a wyvern nor a pterosaur, but a dog-sized dromaeosaur. Despite this difference, both raptor and wyvern share the same space, almost as if they were the same species. Karoo-draken are pretty good at defending their lines against larger predators, but the savanna is also filled with smaller threats that could otherwise pass undetected by them. The social dromaeosaur acts as a pest control and patroller. With their numbers they can cover a good portion of the territories. These creatures have also been observed making sounds related to specific creatures, one even being seemingly specific to large theropods in which the resident Karoo-draken is quick in attend to. The relationship between the king and the knight seems to start the moment they are born. Being laid in the same nest, the eggs will hatch under the guard of the Karoo-draken, who proceeds to feed the young of both species. Though not all creel live under a Karoo-draken's ruling, this rogues without a king can prove to be a threat, with some instances of them trying to take out resident knights or raid nests, but have also been observed not hesitating to join a loner male or follow a female for a couple months until she moves to another region. Their social hierarchy and other traits will be explored more in depth on the future on an episode specific to the dromaeosaurs that inhabit the garden. But now let's get back to the wyvern. As mentioned before, Karoo-draken hunt using their flight. Females hunt most like an azarchid pterosaur would, using flight to get around and localize at their targets, then set a chase on foot. With medium-sized prey they will typically use their jaws to immobilize and then dispatch using their feet, and occasionally taking other flying animals via ambush. Males on the other hand are not effective at pursuing. Being heavy, they can hardly keep up with the smaller targets, not that those can sustain a large male anyway, meaning they need to go to larger game. Karoo-draken males hunt by literally crushing their prey. Thankfully for the blue crown, finding suitable prey isn't a hard task. Thanks to the diversity of grasslands, shrublands and small forested areas, Arborea houses an enormous variety of mammals, rhabdodontomorphs, oviraptorsaurids, large birds, sauropods and many others. Both sexes usually go after the herd animals. Like their distant relative on the clouded mountains, Karoo-draken have a preference for mammals. Males in particular are known for regularly targeting the bison like Marabora. This preference is strongly referenced in folklore and myths, especially in the Naumuro people who reverence both animals, with Karoo-draken representing the triumph of human union over the savagery of the world. When in the hunt, the male will cover a good portion of the ground on foot while tracking prey to avoid exhaustion and for better camouflage amongst the sparse trees, taking on wing to ambush only when the prey is localized, flying low and dropping with their feet to crush the victim with its enormous weight and stab with both talons. The prey is quickly silenced and unable to fight back. Despite being just a fraction of the diversity that one day existed, the monarch wyverns still hold their place in the world as a successful group of animals, both feared and adored by the many people who coexist with them, like true kings.
Hello dear watchers, I'm Ura, the owner of this channel, and I'm here just to make some conclusions about these creatures who are extremely important for the project. Wyverns are one of the longest running creatures in this project, in fact being the first ones to be fully finalized, even before I considered true dragons to exist. So much so that in the original scripts for the main story, the Book of the Stained Bastard, our main character Kodatu wasn't a dragonborn girl, being instead a wyvern riding character named Krell, that was later homenaged on the name of the dromaeosaur companions of Karoo-draken. In many ways the wyverns are inspired by big cats, Monster Hunter, and also are highly inspired by, well, one of the biggest inspirations to the garden as a whole, this being Chimer and the giant megaraptorans. In many ways the Wyverns are the most important figures of the garden development history, showing how far the project has come, and I'm really proud of that. Hope to have all of your folks tuned for the next chapters of the garden, but also many projects to come. See y'all next time.